All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. One of the things that I often do on the show, I've been doing it as long as I have, and I like to have guests on repeatedly, not all the time in this, week after week, but it's always cool to catch up with guests who've been on a few years ago and find out what they're up to now. And one of the guests on this show has been on the show before, but it was back in the before time when we could meet in person and things were looking very different. And I think we have a lot to talk about your band specifically because of the style of music you play and the difficulties of the pandemic. But before we even get started, I think the best way to kick things off is if the two of you want to introduce yourselves, give a bit of background about maybe a bit of background about the group, and let us know what instruments you play in the band.
Sure, totally. So I'm Aaron. I've been on the show once before, but I'm the baritone saxophonist and also the band leader and composer for the band.
And I'm Elizabeth Sadler, and I'm the vocalist, and happy to be joining for the first time today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, I guess I'll give a little bit of background about the band.
Yeah.
We've been together for probably 4 years. And essentially we started off as a cover band. The idea was to be a wedding band.
Okay.
So we wanted to do 60s and 70s soul, funk, and R&B covers, because most of us, the vast majority of us, are from the University of Manitoba, specifically the Jazz Studies program.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got a lot of horn player friends, and we wanted to try and make use of that and get together a big band. The only way to kind of make that viable is if we get into weddings, because that's the only people that can actually pay money.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
So unfortunately that didn't work out, and so we're still broke. But we eventually transitioned into writing some original music, and we released an album in 2019, and then this is our second one, and so we've pretty much transitioned into being entirely an originals band at this point, which is really awesome. Exciting.
It is really cool for sure, especially because I think there's a lot of people playing soul music that are strictly going the cover band route because
right.
It's not kind of it's always been popular and there's always been fans of it, but it's not kind of a big it's not high profile in the mainstream, I guess, soul music
right.
and funk and everything. There's an audience for it, and there always will be, right? But yeah, it's totally. It's cool to see original soul music coming out of Winnipeg too. But with that, as a live band with, what is it, 9 people?
Yeah, 9, and then we've got a couple extras, including your sister.
Yes.
On the album.
It's a large band by any description, and we've just been through, and they're still in a pandemic where getting together in front of audiences, getting together as a band, recording, rehearsing, that's all been difficult. So what is, as much as I hate talking about the pandemic, and I really do, because I'm doing this twice a week for this entire time, and everyone wants to talk about it because it's affecting every musician's ability to do their job, right? So
totally.
Hopefully soon I can stop talking about it, but it's still relevant right now. So what has your experience been as a band, putting together a new album and getting ready for everything that comes along with that in a time when, even being together in the same room is discouraged?
Right. So I think for us, like you were saying, being a 9-piece band, it was super, super difficult because we really couldn't logistically rehearse at all. And that was brutal for us. That made it more difficult to write an album, to record an album. It meant that we couldn't perform it live at all. Even after things started to clear up, we really were just unable to rehearse for long enough that we didn't feel comfortable doing gigs, even when other people were. And so that was difficult for us. But on the flip side, the best part about the pandemic, if there was a good part, was that we could write this album. It gave us time to sit down and really go through the process of writing and pre-production and all of these things that normally we don't have time for. Like this album wasn't even a plan until the pandemic hit. It wasn't an option. It wasn't a thought, because I was going to be on tour for 6 months of the year or something with another band, and all of that kind of caved in, which allowed time. And I think a lot of the other musicians had time and wanted to play as well, and so I think it was a perfect and unfortunate storm.
Yeah. Well, it did force us to bond a little bit more, especially in the beginning, when everyone's those first couple of lockdowns staying at home. we had this forced free time, which is a really good breath of fresh air and a reminder for a lot of us. And I think there was a week, right, every night the whole band was on Jackbox playing
Yeah.
games over the internet, so we were hanging out with each other as people a lot more. So there's and obviously that's gonna positively affect our music once we got into the recording studio. So that was another positive, I guess, that came out of it.
Totally.
Yeah.
When you listen back to the actual recordings, do you feel that closeness? Like, can you hear that sort of in represented in the sound?
I think so, yeah. I also think I hear a lot of development, specifically compared to our first album.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, some of that for sure comes from closeness, and a lot of it just comes from being a band for a lot longer, through a pandemic or without a pandemic.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just, we've grown individually as musicians, but we've also grown together to understand how each other plays and how each other writes, and the concept of what we're playing for.
Yeah, for sure. Well, which is what I mean. What do you think of the concept of this band? Is like who like you said before, the original idea was to sort of be this cover band that played weddings to make some cash, right? So what is the concept now? Now that you've got your 2 albums in of original music, and what's sort of the what drives this band at this moment in time?
In my opinion, the way I think about it is we set out trying to sound like soul and R&B artists, and I don't think that was ever going to happen. We're just not those people.
Yeah.
We don't have that sound. We tried, and it's fun, but I think we ended up realizing that we need to search for our own sound, and I think a lot of that comes through what Liz's voice is best suited for, and what she's lived, and what kind of experience she'd like to talk about. And so I think for this album specifically, we really had a chance to talk about those kind of things, and focus more on her voice and her sound, which became the sound of the band.
Okay.
I don't know if you agree with me.
That's maybe a good question though about the voice, because I mean, soul music, the voice is so key, right? I mean, you think of all of the best known soul artists in history, and it's all like extremely vocally focused, right? So
Right.
Is that pressure? Is there a lot of pressure knowing that you're fronting a soul band to kind of meet those standards, or are you sort of more comfortable just this is how your own interpretations of it and your own version of it?
Oh, tons of pressure. That this is such a funny and a good thing to get onto, because originally when I first joined you guys, I wasn't part of the original inception of what Flatland came to be.
Yeah.
I think I subbed for you guys last minute on a gig,
Right.
and I learned the songs in a couple of days, and I started, I knew of the group, and I thought, oh, it'd be fun to really like get in with these guys and sing this music. And as I started doing it, I was like, wow, this music is like nothing I've ever sang before. I haven't listened to as much of it as I had wanted to at that point. And I realized, I was trying to sort of replicate that huge energy, that huge persona, and that's not how I come up naturally and how I approach my music naturally. So at the beginning, it was a ton of pressure, and I felt a bit out of place, and like I didn't really belong. And but the guys were really really encouraging and welcoming. And I think finally, once I kind of settled in and spent time with everyone, I realized that I'm just trying to make my own voice, but singing these songs. I'm not trying to sound like them. It's really just, if we're going to make it sound different, if it's going to have a lighter vibe, that's okay, because it's way better having it just be who I am and who we are through the songs than trying to sound exactly like someone else. So once I finally figured that out, which was only like a couple years in already, it started to get a lot better.
Well, one of the things that comes up a lot on this show, just like regardless of who I'm talking to, is the concept of being genuine and being authentic. And like I've always felt that my favorite types of music, regardless of whether it's hip hop or punk rock or soul or jazz or anything, country, is when the person seems like they are legitimately representing who they are and where they're from. And I think that a lot of people, especially doing music that is maybe not necessarily native to Manitoba, are taking they feel like they need to put on airs and put on a vibe and sort of pretend that they're authentic, when being themselves usually comes across as a lot more authentic, especially with something like hip hop, where you have guys rapping as if they're from New York, And if they just used their actual accent and talked about what they're experiencing in Manitoba, it would be much
Right.
better quality, right? So I think that, yeah, that is something that once you can kind of tap into your own self and project that, it feels more real.
Yeah,
Totally.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like particularly on this latest album, that's something we keyed into more than we ever have. Especially for me, just having Liz as part of the writing process for the lyrical content and for just understanding the stories behind the songs. Like it, in my opinion, that made it easier for I don't know if you want to speak on this, but
Mm.
it hopefully made it easier for you to sing to the concept of and relate to the songs instead of just singing them, you know?
Definitely. Well, yeah. So with our first album, Aaron composed all the music, all the lyrics, like all the content, and
Yeah.
you did a great job.
Thank you.
And it was nice to just show up and have these wonderful like compositions ready for you. You just have to learn them, perform them, love them. But no, you came to me and you said, okay, like we're gonna do this other album. Like I want this to be like something that really inspires you and like that you feel has your stamp on it. And I was like, what?
Uh-huh.
But no, yeah, it was definitely a very collaborative process in terms of the lyrics, but we spent tons of time going back and forth,
Mhm.
coming at them from different angles,
Yeah.
collaborating on that together.
And then we ended up still writing them when we were doing the recording session. Yeah.
Literally like minutes between takes. We were
Yeah.
totally changing the lyrics. It was it was very stressful, but it really came together.
Yeah.
How does that process work with a 9-piece band? And like, it's been a long time, but I was in a 10-piece band when I was a teenager in a ska band at the time that
Right.
ska was, really happening. And
Yeah.
that was a huge pain in the ass just to
Yeah.
get everyone together and get people to learn their parts or show up for shows or whatever. I mean, what is it like kind of trying to like corral all those people and get them to learn, especially during pandemic, all of these songs? Like, is it kind of like herding cats or what?
I feel like for me personally, it's I feel like I have to be in a more of a dictator role
Yeah.
because of the size of the band. So if we were like a 3 or 4 piece band, we could have a lot more of a collaborative writing process. But I think because we have 5 horns, we kind of have to write and specifically arrange for them.
Yeah.
And so that ends up making me more of like a composer than something like a generic kind of songwriter position. Not
Okay.
not to say one is worse or one is better or anything. And I love both approaches, but it felt more like writing it for a big band than it did for writing for a jazz combo or something.
Mhm.
Did the first record feel different?
No, it was similar. I think this one felt better to write because Liz was involved, and so that took pressure off of me lyrically, and also a lot of the musicians had ideas for changes once we came in with the first rehearsal and started doing pre-production and stuff. So it seemed more collaborative this time,
Okay.
and easier as a result for me.
Was it very clear to the rest of the band members that sort of the two of you were driving it as far as writing and composing things?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say, Aaron would you would have these ideas pretty developed, I'd say, before they were brought to the band. And so we'd have sort of the, melodic and harmonic composition all done out. And, we'd show up for rehearsals and, I wouldn't have any words. We'd just be learning the melodies and starting with that. And then every couple of rehearsals, they'd see like more of the story be built in. So yeah, I
Cool.
think they definitely got the gist that Aaron was coming at it with the composition, of course, being totally open to suggestions, and then that we were, yeah, kind of the story builders with that one. And
Cool.
yeah.
Well, I get the feeling too that, based on some of the people who are in the group, there's a lot of and with yourself too, Aaron. I mean, a lot of other projects going on too, right? It's, I mean, like
Yeah.
everyone's in like 7 bands, right? So
Right.
I guess that method probably works well for them, where they're sort of just saying, someone gives them the material and says, here, look, this is what we've got for you. It's probably easier than trying to get everyone from all their various other extracurricular activities to really
Yeah, right.
kind of hone in and work on the writing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like I've been on the other side of that as well with a couple of different bands, just showing up and being told what to do and doing that. And I feel like I do like that, like just being kind of a gun for hire in some cases, or part of a band as a musician, but not necessarily part of a band as a writer. I feel like those are very different things.
Mhm.
And I don't think we need 9 writers in a band. I just am not interested in that, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, you could have like a whole record of completely different songs. It would be
Yeah,
no
right.
cohesion. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no. Yeah, probably. That would be very likely.
It might
I
sound
would-
good.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd try and pitch it to a label or anything, but
No, that might be a bit too confusing for them. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
If you love this one song, you're gonna hate the rest of the record.
That's right. So with this new record, I mean, you've already kind of established that the way the songs are written has changed a bit, and with more of the both of you involved and things like that. But sonically, is there a big jump from record 1 to record 2 that listeners will pick up on?
Absolutely. So right now we're in Paintbox recording doing this interview, and that's actually where we recorded the bed tracks for the album, and that
Okay.
was a big step because the first album we ended up recording most of the bed tracks and stuff at my parents' place, and they've got a wonderful sounding living room. It's great. They've got a piano in it and everything, but it's not a studio. It's different. And since making the first album, I've actually had studio experience in Paintbox as an intern assistant and
cool.
running
Okay.
some other
Well, that
sessions
helps, yeah.
and stuff. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's been incredibly helpful to understand what the album process looks like. And so I think we just came in more prepared this time. And even Robert, our guitarist, he mixed a couple songs on the album, and he was co-producer and a co-engineer on the album as well. And he's had, I mean, a number more years since the first album came out to develop as well. And I just think that time gave us kind of an understanding of what needs to happen and what we can do to make things better, and
Yeah.
what is actually, just kind of perspective, right?
That
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
sense.
And
Oh,
like
sorry, go ahead.
sonic. Oh, no. Yeah, sonically, I guess because of that, everything's just slightly more like elevated, if you will, or like finessed maybe. Harmony wise, I think things are a little bit more lush, and we have a little bit more prolonged horn writing. And
We also chose to avoid not because I don't know if we want to get super political about this, but we chose to avoid pitch correction, so auto tune,
Yeah.
quantization, so rhythmic editing, copy and paste, and samples or virtual instruments. So all of that is free from this album, which wasn't the case with the first album.
That's actually maybe a good point to bring up, though, too. Is, I mean, obviously samples and things like that people have a general understanding of, but something like pitch correction or things like that, like, I mean, that's, people think auto-tune, they have a very specific thing in mind they're thinking of, and it's like, the R&B singer doing the robot voice for the whole track. But there's a lot more to it than just that, right? I mean, I think the fact that a band like yours would have even used stuff like that at all is maybe a surprise to some people, because they don't realize how sort of prevalent it is, right? So, I mean, how much of the stuff is, I mean, are people hearing this way more and not realizing it? I think that's what's happening, right? People are hearing all these little tweaks and
particularly, I mean, with pitch correction, but also with things like quantization or various other studio trickery techniques. We're hearing it constantly. It's not just in pop music, not just in rock or country. I mean, even as far as classical recordings, they don't go top to bottom. They'll do cuts to comp a performance together to make sure it's perfect.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, the reason we decided not to go with that is because I think most of us are from the jazz idiom, and that's something that we kind of wanted to embody. And that's kind of the one genre, or one of the few genres in my mind, that really stays away from that. And in my opinion, the goal of jazz music is to accurately, or jazz recordings is to accurately represent what the music sounds like live. And so we didn't even double Liz's vocals. We got her sister, who fortunately sounds almost identical,
Yeah.
It's a
to
bonus,
come in
yeah.
and do
A
yeah
tricky double. Yeah.
yeah
Sneaky one.
to come in and do background vocals, so that essentially what you hear on the album is what we could actually perform live, and it would sound like that. And it took a huge amount of work trying to get horns in tune and in time without using studio trickery. And again, I'm not saying that pitch correction is the devil. I think it's great in a huge amount of situations.
Yeah.
I would use it happily. I own Melodyne, but we decided to aspire to something a little different on this album, and I'm happy with the results.
Well, that method is more in line with soul historically anyway, right? I mean, it's a very live genre of music. Most of those classic records were recorded live in the studio with a full band playing all at once. And I mean, that kind of, again, not like we mentioned, I mean, not everyone's noticing when they hear pitch corrections and things like that. But I mean, having that raw sound is got to be, and it can't hurt, right? When you're playing a style of music that is live just by its nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd say, we've talked about this before, like our ears, just without knowing, like you're saying, is just trained to hear such a high expectation of sound, so you're going to hear it when it's wrong. You're not going to know it when it's right. So yeah, again, just kind of touching on the labor of love, as it was.
I feel like it must be difficult being a vocalist in like 2021.
Oh yeah, I bet,
everything you're comparing yourself to is unnatural, and like that's kind of unhealthy if you think about it. But at the same time, it also maybe advances us as like a human race in terms of our vocal perfection. I don't know.
Our vocal excellence will be crazy one day. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. No, there's definitely, well, I mean, you and I've talked, like, Aaron writes really, I'd say rhythmically, and like inspired by, I mean, you were coming from different instruments, right? So I find sometimes when I see the melodies that Aaron has written, I'm like, Aaron, I don't know if I can really do this, like, without, getting really grumpy about it, because, there's lots of jumps in here. This is really rhythmic. This is going to be hard to like add the words to. So we go back and forth. We make it work, right?
I don't know if you've once told me, no, I can't do this. You'll say, oh, this is difficult, or, oh, this might take some practice, but I don't think you've ever straight up said no once.
Well,
and you probably, there were times where, like,
I wouldn't want to do something in rehearsal.
Yeah.
All the time. Well, not all the time, but
there. What's
the octave one?
Yeah, the world is right in front of you. That took a lot of work and a lot of misguidance from me for you to finally come in and be like, oh, I've got it.
So
thank goodness you got it.
Yes, yeah. There's, I think, is it in Leave It All Behind?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and Leave It All Behind. I didn't just whip that octave out, singers out there.
Right.
And musicians. Yeah, when we did the vocals in like our first go through of it, they were completely horrible. My voice was cracking at the top, and you were giving me some instruction. I was trying to like listen to that, add that. No, scrap that whole routine. Just had to like I just went home and like really like just approached it from like 10 different angles, and then it came together in like the second go, and that's just what had to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we made it through several rehearsals and a recording session before we actually got it right.
Yeah,
like we recorded legit vocal tracks
like
on
the
that
day it was supposed to be.
Yeah, and then we ended up re-recording it because you figured it out and it sounded way better.
Cool. Well, I guess it's a different, like almost a different mindset too, right? Writing for vocals versus writing for instruments. I mean, obviously the basics are the same because it's an instrument like anything else, but it's got to be like it probably works well if two of you combined writing together, because one of you is looking at it from this one end and one's looking for a completely other angle, right?
Yeah, it's just like you said, like voice is an instrument, like any instrument. We all have our parameters, and the more that you work with other people that are writing for you, you're writing for them, you just get more used to the intricacies, the parameters, the benefits, the things that make the essence, the essence of that sound.
I think the interesting thing for me about writing for vocalists is that you have to write specifically for a vocalist. You don't write for the vocal instrument. You write for a person's range, a person's what their tone, their and
Mhm.
there's all these nuances that there's nuances to saxophone and drums and guitar and all this stuff as
Sure.
well. And to some extent, I'll write a part for one guitarist that I wouldn't for another, but it's, I think, an entirely different level with vocalists. It's like you don't sound like Aretha Franklin, and so
No.
I'm not going to write something that sounds like Aretha Franklin.
That makes complete sense. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Does just knowing each other and working together for longer periods of time, that must help, right? That must help to get those nuances and figure out what works for instruments versus voice and vice versa.
Totally.
Absolutely.
I
Yep.
I think the funny thing is, the more we write together, the more we know each other as well.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
I think it's writing is like such a bonding process in a lot of ways, because it's kind of like talking about your deepest life experiences and then writing them down. It's like it's very therapy,
Yes,
yeah.
it's very therapizing.
I don't,
Yeah.
I don't know if I would call it therapeutic, because sometimes it's not, but it is very much like therapy,
Yeah.
Okay,
you know?
I like how you made
And
the distinction between the two. Actually, that's interesting. Yeah,
um, but yeah, I think writing with somebody definitely, brings you closer, or gives you a more thorough understanding of who they are as a person and what they want to do with their music, with their life, with anything, really.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I'd say in the beginning, I think it's safe to speak for both of us to say that Aaron and I are both, we're polite people. We're
Yeah.
Canadians, right? So I remember when we first started, you had a lot more experience in songwriting than I have and do still, but um, there is that little bit of politeness at the beginning of like wanting to be like, is this idea okay? Like I want to show you, but like I don't really want to show you. And once that kind of like that did crumble eventually, and then you could like really get to just like the free flow conversations, and that yeah, that's really where things kind of picked up, I guess.
Totally.
So you have this record that is out now, and when people are hearing this, they'll be able to get it in their ear holes right away. Um, what is that process like of actually releasing something during a pandemic? Because that's a whole other side of things, compared to the recording and rehearsing and all that, which is a challenge of its own. But actually
Yeah.
releasing music in a time where the typical avenues, I guess, to release music are either shut or are very kind of tenuous at best. What is that experience like?
Um, well, first off, I want to say that I really enjoy the process of writing and recording an album, and everything after that I do not like very much. The
Yeah.
social media part, the designating art, and we were discussing a music video, and unfortunately that fell through because of the pandemic and also
Yeah.
restrictions, and I don't have infinite money, unfortunately. But um it's definitely, it was weird in a pandemic for sure, particularly because we couldn't play a release show. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's kind of what you do, is you make an album, you play a show, and then you tour it. And
You
that's
welcome it into
that's
the world with a big party. Yeah.
exactly, that's what
Exactly.
everybody's been doing since the dawn
Dawn
of
of
music.
time.
Yeah.
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 And we couldn't do that. It just wasn't going to happen. And unfortunately now we can't play them live at all, since half the band moved away. And unfortunately this was kind of our so long.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that makes me feel better about the breakup of the band, knowing that we've got this kind of time capsule of what we sounded like at what I would say is our peak,
Yeah.
Mhm.
um
When you
but
went
in
into
terms,
this, did you know that though? Was that already sort of kind of in the air when you were working on putting this album together, like writing the songs
um
at the very beginning?
it was getting more difficult to keep a band together, particularly, I mean, through the pandemic it was difficult, but even
Yeah.
without a pandemic, um Anthony had already left, and we got James, who is phenomenal. He's an unreal trombonist. But then
It was just the
y-
timing of it all, really. Like
yeah, and
we go ahead, go ahead.
we're most of us are at the age where we're trying to figure out our careers, we're trying to figure out our lives and all
Yeah.
this stuff. And
Yeah.
so many of us ended up moving for a career, or moving for post-secondary education, or deciding, music as a full-time career isn't for me, and I'm going to find something else. And so that changes whether or not we can tour, or what our gig schedule looks like, or
For
how
sure.
many rehearsals we can do. It just it became less and less feasible throughout the pandemic to continue this band.
Yeah. It's
Which
very natural like
yeah,
fizzle.
I don't think, as weird as it is, I don't think Flatland breaking up is a bad thing, because it led to so many good things for all of the players.
Yeah.
I mean, there's multiple people from the band doing master's degrees right now at like really, really incredible schools. There's people that moved and got careers that I'm really proud of them for, and everybody's doing really well. And if Flatland breaks up as a result of everybody doing well, I'm not going to be mad at that. Of
Yeah, you can't,
course.
right?
That's
You
incredible.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel about it.
Yes. Yeah. All those things. Yeah.
There was a moment of sadness
Sure.
when we all discussed it. It's because I don't know.
Kind of the elephant in the room for like those couple of weeks before like you kind of made the call,
Totally.
Yeah, no one like wanted to say what was pretty evident, but
Right.
yeah.
Well, with all that
sure.
in mind, though, sorry,
Yeah.
what does that mean for the record now? I mean, because you're not going to be able to, like you said, do a release show for it. You're obviously not touring for it.
Right.
So what happens? Are you happy with it just sort of being out there and to be heard by whoever wants it? Because I can't imagine there's going to be a big promotional push for this
Right.
with that news, right?
Right. Well, I would love it to be like the thing that happened to the Middle Coast, where they broke up, released an album, and then it blew up, and all of their careers blew up as a result.
Yeah.
But regardless, that's not the point. It's I'd love for as many people as possible to listen to it and give feedback on it, and I'm incredibly proud of it, but I don't think the success of the album is based off of monetary
Sure.
sales or the amount of listens. It's I don't attribute a number to the success of the album in this time. I think for me the success was that we finished it and released it, and that I'm happy with it. And so I don't know, maybe we'll have like a reunion in like 15 years and we'll come up with a third album or something. I don't know.
Could happen for
That'd be
sure.
great.
Yeah, we have the internet to stay in touch, right, and work on songs if you decide to do that.
Exactly.
really
That would be
do.
awesome.
Yeah.
So where do people hear this now? I mean, the album's out. This is your swan song, as you said. Where can people find this and actually give it a listen?
All streaming platforms. It's on Spotify, it's on whatever, Amazon Music, Deezer, for whoever listens to Deezer.
Is that a thing?
Apparently I've never met anybody that uses that platform, but apparently it's on there.
You're on there, yeah.
Check it out. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, we didn't do physical releases for this because nobody owns a CD player anymore.
Well, I still do.
And well,
we all probably do in the band for sure, but yeah.
But yeah, we just decided to go all digital with that one.
Okay. It does make sense given the circumstances too, right?
Yeah, exactly,
totally.
exactly.
Of the pandemic and the band ending, both of those things kind of make that a good choice, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think we're in a position to sell that kind of merch, and it didn't make sense financially or otherwise.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely take a listen to it on whatever streaming platform you choose. It's up on YouTube, it's up on iTunes, or whatever you want as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, and with the good thing about this being a podcast, and maybe a bad thing in this case, is that people could hear it right when it comes out, or they could hear it 2 years from now. So I mean, if someone gets halfway through this 2 years from now thinking you're still an active band, then the bomb drops on them, partway through the conversation.
They'll get sad.
Is there what's the best way to sort of, I was going to say keep in touch with what you guys are up to, which is probably the wrong word because you're not going to be up to anything. But what's the best way to kind of follow the band, I guess? I mean, do you have social media you prefer people checking out if they want to stay involved, if anything's happening in future?
Yeah, we definitely, I mean, we've got a Facebook, we've got an Instagram. You can just search up Flatland Soul Band. It's on Instagram, it's on Facebook. We have a YouTube, but it's not a very great YouTube channel. So maybe stick to the social medias. And of course, so many of us have side projects as well, or other projects. So yeah, for me personally, I'm in Apollo Sons, I'm in Last Chance Gang, and I do some production stuff through Aaron Bartel Production, if you want to
Cool.
check that out on Facebook. And
Yeah,
you've got a bunch of stuff too, hey?
I have some things, mostly,
Cool.
just as myself, Elizabeth.
Or the Sadler Sisters.
Or the Sadler Sisters. Yes, check out the Sadler Sisters on Insta. But yeah, no, I encourage everyone to just, get curious, Google all of our names in the listing, and hit us up and check out what we're doing.
Cool.